Hey, welcome back. So we've explored the concept of ADSR envelopes, attack, decay, sustain, and release. Now what we're going to do is start using those. So I want to show you a really cool device called a drum rack in Ableton Live. Do you remember earlier when we worked on the snare and the clap? We took those audio samples and we put them into this MIDI device or an instrument called Impulse. And we were able to apply some drive, some stretching, some transposing, and even some filtering to those samples. And so that helped us to manipulate them further. Well, there's another device which is pretty cool in Ableton Live called Simpler. And it's basically a simplified version of Sampler, which is even more powerful. So when you load up Simpler, it won't play any sounds first because we need to drop a sound into it. So we're going to go into the Bass Gorilla Ableton Live Skill Builder course sample pack, and you'll see these synth one-shots. Some pretty cool sounds here. I'm going to take the 6th sound and drop it in here. Okay. So we can play that now at different pitches. And what's really cool about it, do you remember in the last tutorial we talked about envelopes, is you can actually create different kinds of envelopes for this sound now. So we can bring the sustain level all the way down. And make it more of a plucky sound. Or we can boost that sustain level up. But what we can also do is activate the filter envelope, set the filter frequency, and then assign this filter to the envelope by a maximum amount of 72 or minus 72. So that's with the filter envelope. When I turn off the filter envelope, it sounds kind of flat and doesn't have any movement in it. Cool. So we've got filter envelopes, we've got volume envelopes, and we've got pitch envelopes. So we can assign this envelope to the pitch, and then we can use the attack, decay, sustain, and release times and settings to add a bit of punch initially to the sound. Cool, so that is an overview of the envelopes in Simpler, and we can also shorten the loop length of it and click on loop here, and now that's just going to play forever. But we can also introduce fading to it. To make it smoother. So now we have more of a continuous long note. And the envelope is applied to all of it, but that initial plucky rise in frequency that you hear is applied to the very start, and it is applied all the way through as this loops until I take my finger off of the pad. So that's very nice. There's a lot of control over this sample that we have in Simpler. So there's the start, loop, length, and fade settings. We can snap it into a position so that it basically crosses over at an amplitude of 0. So you can see here, this point here is at an amplitude of 0, and that will help to reduce clicks. And we have the volume, filter, and pitch envelopes that we've discussed. And We also have LFOs, and we'll talk about LFOs later when we start looking more at synths, but this is just to give you a brief introduction to the simpler device. I'm going to delete it now because there's an even more powerful device than the simpler, and that is, well, there is sampler as well. We'll look at that later, but if we go into instruments, we have a drum rack, and this is an awesome tool. So it's basically giving us the opportunity to use many different instances of simpler independently of each other within one instrument. So we've loaded up drum rack. You can see it has these cells here, 16 cells, and we can click down here to see even more cells. So there are a total of, I think, 128 different cells on there. And if we go into the Ableton Live Skill Builder samples pack, we have the synth one-shots. Let's select all of them. So I just select one and then I hold shift and click on the bottom one. So we've got them all selected. Now we can drag them and drop them into our drum rack. So we've got those all in there now, and in the next video we're going to start to create an arrangement with these and then start to affect some of these individual samples independently of the other ones. So I'll see you in the next tutorial.